Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Researcher's Lens. Today, we have Dr. Rajesh Gopakumar, who is a distinguished theoretical physicist renowned for his groundbreaking contributions to string theory and quantum field theory. Currently serving as the director of the International Center for Theoretical Sciences in Bangalore, India, Dr. Gopakumar has been at the forefront of theoretical physics research for over 2 decades. His pioneering work, particularly in areas of gauge string duality and topological string theory, has significantly advanced our understanding of fundamental physics. Dr. Gopakumar's insights and research continue to inspire and shape the field, making him one of the leading figures in the global scientific community. So, sir, could you please share some key moments from your research journey that were particularly challenging or rewarding, and how these experiences shaped your approach towards science and research?
Well, a few moments is difficult, but I mean, I would say a general experience, especially uh, going through a PhD, and was a very formative experience for my research because that's when you transition from being a student to a researcher. And I was very fortunate to have one of the most renowned theoretical physicists of the last half century, I guess, David Gross, who was later got the Nobel Prize for his work in the strong interactions. He was my advisor, and even now he actually plays a very strong supportive role for our institution and me. So working with him was a very formative experience. Especially there were times when we were spending 8 9 hours in his office figuring out things, and so it really gave me that first-hand experience of knowing how you struggle with trying to develop your ideas and try how ideas come about through discussions and through through the kind of challenging and criticizing and the kind of through conversations, but in a very critical way.
Right.
That's how good ideas come out, and you have to be constantly challenging yourself and have others challenge you. And these are new modes of operating compared to when you're a student and you're trying to solve some predetermined questions in your course books. So the PhD experience was a very valuable one, and afterwards, when I think some of the works that I did it develops then a confidence in you that you can also kind of have your own original insights, and which are maybe no one else has had, and that's sometimes a very uh, exhilarating feeling, and then but it instills a certain confidence in you, and I
Yes.
think that was very useful, and that has helped me, I think. Yeah, and I think in India, coming back and also striking out on an independent path within broadly in string theory, but I've kind of been developing my own approach to things that I think um, helped to develop my scientific career and make me feel that I'm doing what I always wanted to do.
Great. Could you share your perspective on the current state of India's research culture, and what are the major strengths and areas that needs improvement?
So I think India is very fortunate. I think for a developing nation that we have since independence developed actually even from before independence developed a scientific culture
Right.
and ideas of science found a very fertile ground in India. And then post independence, definitely many scientific institutions were built, and India for a country that started off in very fairly poor, decided to invest
Right.
public resources in that, which has paid off in the long run. I think
Right.
our successes in space or atomic energy or even software
Right.
all come from that deep investment that we made in the sciences early on. So we are lucky in that respect compared to many other countries. But I think now, after 75 years after independence or more, we should be having even bigger ambitions, and we should be aiming to shape the scientific discourse in the world. And I think we can. I mean, Indian scientists can do that in many subjects. So I would say in India, we we are well poised to go to that next stage because we have the foundation. We have
Yes.
we have the foundation on which to build, but it requires now that act of building
Right.
from that base, and for that we need to expand it considerably. We need to expand the number of scientists we have. If you look at the number of scientists per capita in India, it's very small
Right.
compared to even China
Correct.
or America.
Yeah.
I think we are maybe about I forget the figures now. I think we were maybe about 30 times less if you look at the number
Okay.
of scientists per 100,000
Okay.
population. I think we are almost a factor of 30 less than the US,
Okay.
and even a factor of 10 less than China, maybe, or 5 to 10 less than China. So definitely the number of scientifically trained people, I think we can and should expand that, because they will be the resource on
Correct.
which, the human resource on which you build, go to this next stage. And you need the large numbers. It's almost like the law of large numbers. You have to have that broad set of researchers
Yes.
to be able to uh, expect regular breakthroughs, regular sort of pioneering works. So for that requires training. It requires building new institutions, supporting them with adequate resources. I think the management of science, I mean the funding apparatus, the way in which scientific institutions are run, all these I think need reform, so to say. Just like there have been economic reforms which have helped to, I think,
Correct.
uh, to make to kind of make things easier for new ventures and so on. I think we need to have scientific reforms in that sense, reforms in the scientific infrastructure, which will change the kind of bureaucratic or top down way in which science
Correct.
is often
Correct.
administered.
Correct.
So, in terms of infrastructure, of course, resources are also important. I think India has traditionally been stronger in the theoretical sciences, which needed fewer resources, and that was understandable. Again, going back 70 years or 80 years, 100 years, that was understandable given the situation. But that isn't, we should not be at that, continue on that stage. For the future, we should build on the theoretical sciences, and in fact I think we can do much more even there. But the experimental sciences need a lot more resources, and even theoretical sciences now in our institute, a lot of it is very computational. And
Correct.
so the resources needed for even theorists, it's not just a pen and paper or a blackboard and chalk.
Yes.
It used to be you need serious computing resources, whether it is in
Best
the,
example could be a CERN laboratory.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean the analysis of data. And then even for theorists who are studying hard problems, a lot of the work is no longer analytical. It is computational. So yeah, so I think we have to significantly invest in computational resources, in experimental experimentalists and experimental infrastructure. There's a whole ecosystem that
Yeah.
goes with the experimental physics. I think we need to invest in. Mm.
Yeah. So, what role is ICTS playing here? So, how is ICTS empowering theoretical researchers, encouraging more researchers to be, working on cutting edge scientific topics?
Yes.
Yeah.
In that sense, I think ICTS plays a unique role. I mean, we have the mandate. We are part of the Tata Institute of Fundamental
Yes.
Research, which is, of course, premier research, has been for over 75 years. Very one of the leading research institutes in the country,
Yes.
and has made many important discoveries have come out of it. Um, so ICTS as a center of TIFR reflects the leadership that TIFR is taking in trying to make a difference to the ecosystem in India. And though it says theoretical sciences, and it is true that the largest impact is in theoretical sciences, but the we are not kind of, I think we have an indirect impact, and I will try to explain even in the experimental sciences. So the way I think we think of ourselves is like a catalyst,
Okay.
like a small amount of platinum can
Right.
really catalyze a big reaction. You
Right.
don't need a very large sort of sometimes that the right ingredients brought to the right place
Right.
can make a big difference. That's what ICTS does, and we do it through, and we are unique in the country as of now in organizing collaborative workshops and what we call programs. Uh, and these are organized and held at ICTS, but they are organized by the academic organization is done by researchers from all over India, and
Okay.
in fact from around the world. That's why we are
Okay.
an international center.
Yes.
So we run something like, so just to make it concrete, we run something like 30 to 30, 35, now sometimes 40 such collaborative workshops every year.
Right.
And most of them are organized by researchers from outside ICTS or even outside TIFR, from
Right.
all the scientific institutions in the country and from abroad. We have had organizers. And what they do is they send us proposals for
Okay.
programs that they would like to organize, or workshops they would like to organize in cutting edge areas of science,
Right.
which are globally right now at the frontier.
Wow.
And what these workshops do is bring some of the best experts in India and abroad together at ICTS. They bring them physically to ICTS for a period of typically about 2 weeks,
Okay.
in which it's not like a conference. It's
Okay.
more for developing collaborations
Okay.
between researchers, so they have much more intense discussions as
Right.
well as lectures.
Okay.
And b, there's a pedagogical aspect
Okay.
which is aimed at graduate students, PhD
Okay.
students, or even sometimes master's students,
Hmm.
to give them exposure to this new area. So we often have a mini courses as part of this. So people give 3 or 4 lectures on this cutting edge topic, so to bring people up to speed
Got it.
in this new area. And that way, uh, our PhD students within the country are not at a disadvantage. They can get into a new area quickly. Because the best way to learn a new topic is not through reading all the literature. I mean, that's in principle possible,
Right.
but it's the most effective way is to directly have face to face
Great
interactions.
conversations.
And we have a residential campus. So
Okay.
all the lecturers stay there, all the people who are participating in the workshop stay there. So they're having breakfast, lunch, dinner, everything together. And it's not just during the classroom interactions, it's
Right.
through
Right.
the whole immersion that
Right.
they develop linkages, they come up with new ideas. So for instance, we've been keeping track almost like 3 to 4 research papers per week, or per program. So about
Okay.
2 research papers per week come out of our programs on average. So
Okay.
people acknowledge the ICTS program now, when some discussions have helped in leading to. So we've kept track in the last 5 years, some 600 odd research papers have acknowledged ICTS as a place which has helped in the paper being paper happening. So in that sense, we are a catalyst. We bring all these people together, Indians and people from outside India, set up new networks of collaboration, and train young people. So that lowers the barrier of
Right.
entry
Right.
into a subject.
Right.
So yeah, so I think this has been very successful. Over 3,000 people participate every year now in our programs. So overall, I think maybe and half of these are PhD students or
Right.
master's students.
True.
So I think around by now about 10,000 or 10 to 12,000 students have passed through ICTS, and I'm talking of PhD students. So
Yes.
over a 10-year period, you have a sizable impact.
Right.
The other way in which
Yeah.
we have an impact is that it's not only the people who participate, we archive all our talks. They
Okay.
are we have a YouTube channel called
Yes.
ICTS Talk.
Yes. Yes.
It has over 7,000 lectures.
Right.
I think it's one of the largest such repositories, not only in India,
True.
but worldwide.
True.
And it has very high quality talks and
Yes.
lectures on almost every topic in the theoretical sciences, and even some things of interest to experimentalists, because some of our physics and other programs have experimentalists also
Right.
participating or even organizing,
Right.
because even experimentalists need to be interacting with theorists and with each other to come up with new ideas, new strategies, and so on. And then you can go and do your work in your lab.
Good. Good.
But ICTS is like a platform for all these
Right.
people to come
Right.
together.
Uh,
So this YouTube channel has been very popular. So that's another way in which you disseminate this
Correct.
knowledge.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah,
Another thing that I have observed, if we look at entities like IOP or Springer, or even like Physics World, which is I think part of
yeah.
IOP itself. Then we have American Physical Society. Um, so these entities have been very popular internationally. Are there any, because if we just take an example of ICTS, you just mentioned the videos, the lectures, and these are high quality lectures that have been published on YouTube. Um, are there any particular initiatives that are being carried out to popularize such kind of platforms, not just in India but outside India as well?
We haven't actively done that, and maybe it's a good idea to do that, to actively promote it. But I think our viewership is very global. I mean, it's
Okay.
still, of course, in India, a lot of people, but nowadays, very often, even for me, when I have to sometimes search for something related to my research, I Google search it, and
Right.
often an ICTS video comes up on top for that topic, a specialized topic in maths or something else I want to learn about. So I think that's been the case for. I've met many people around the world who've told me, "Oh, I watched these wonderful ICTS videos on X, Y, or Z." We haven't actively promoted it, but I think we have over 60,000 subscribers. I would say a good fraction of them are
Yes.
from outside India,
Yes.
and the viewership also. But I think you're right that we could make it even bigger.
Especially for the undergraduates, even though topics
Yeah,
are a little more complex for them, but
yes,
I think just to expose them to such topics will
right.
generate that curiosity in them to explore a little deeper.
Right. I think we do have material, in fact, for lay people to very specialized
Yes.
work, and I think we should do a better job. And I'm trying to ask people also more, people who are into this a little more, about how to smartly categorize the videos and so on, so that someone who wants to, can really browse through it and come up
Correct.
with the content that they want. Otherwise, it's often you may not know what you're looking for.
Correct.
So but if there's a good way to navigate the
Yes.
7,000 lectures, I think it would be very useful.
Right. One
uh,
thing I have observed that typically, just the same examples. Even physics org is there,
hmm.
science direct, and these. So I see them, more like from many years they have built some kind of a brand,
Yes.
for themselves. So but when I compare it with platforms in India, the quality of lectures is there. We have experts from like various domains, but I think the brand building approach is
Hmm.
somewhere is missing on various
Exactly.
platforms.
And I think this is comes back to the earlier question that we had about the reforms.
Yes.
I think the Indian institutions, as they're currently structured and they're currently funded,
Yeah.
it becomes very difficult for us to do these things.
Correct. Correct.
I think you need to have specialized people who can do this. I mean,
Right.
media personnel. I mean, we need
Right.
to be able to hire the right kind of people. And this
Correct.
should be part of the mandate of the institution. It
Right.
should be recognized that an institution needs to do this and therefore needs the human resources to
Correct.
do these things. So this is where I think an institutional reforms will help, the research, the good quality research to come out, and be a global brand, as you said. But at the moment,
Yes.
uh, we lack the kind of structures that can help us to do this. If you look at CERN or something, they have
Yes.
such a huge
Yes.
outreach
Correct.
division, and any organizations, physics, the APS, and so on,
Yes.
they pay a lot of attention to this. It's not a kind of a frill. Mm.
Right, right. They organize so many conferences, events, and that too at large level.
Right.
So yeah. Also, another thing, this is something that I experienced when I completed my graduation. I was focused on entrepreneurship, so it didn't bother me much. But when I was discussing with my peers, it's something that I realized. Our And that's incentives to do research, especially now if you look at undergraduates, they are not practically trained to conduct research. There are lots of things that needs to be carried out, lots of things that they need to learn. But if you compare and even a postgraduate, in physics or chemistry or mathematics, and compare them with someone in computer science or electronics domain, we see a huge difference in terms of incentives, at that particular stage. And I understand the constraints from the institutions end as well. This is something we discussed with my friends. Uh, but are there any solutions to such kind of problems and challenges where we can incentivize the process a little bit more and also make it more productive for these young minds as well?
No, definitely. I think there's a lot that can be done there. I often feel, again, as you said, ultimately, this is all part of. This is where institutions and the structure comes in. I think our institutions have not been very good at getting the best out of people. People often uh, could have done much, much better if somehow the structures were better. I think, uh, apart from I mean, I think this is where the involvement of philanthropy and so on can really come and play a role, or even like foundations which really have a mission to develop the science in the country, because they feel that this is very important for India for the next 50 years or 75 years. This is something you have to lay the foundations for. And if there is that vision from outside the government also,
Yes.
I think, and if they can, and if scientific institutions and these foundations or other philanthropic individuals, organizations can find a good way to work with each other, then I think much more can be done by way of incentivization of research, because sometimes there are some institutional constraints or
Yes.
government funding constraints
Yes.
which could be overcome by
Yeah.
a small, not necessarily a large sum of money, but just having something to give you a little flexibility,
Right.
a little bit that you can add on without having to kind of go through a lot of hoops. Um, so that little elbow room that you can get by this kind of intervention is a very valuable thing, and I've seen it in the US how well that functions, because even the richest in universities like Princeton or Harvard
Yeah.
or any of them, they are they are still trying to get additional resources which will help to start new initiatives,
Right.
incentivize new directions, get people to work on a certain area which is maybe very important. So there are multiple ways of doing this, which I think we should learn from some of these institutions, how successful they are. I mean, uh, of course, I'm not saying that uh, uh, science should be ultimately curiosity driven, and also this thing, I'm not saying it should be always actively shaped by institutions
Right.
or outside entities, but there are certain collective things certain things that can only be done collectively, and
Correct.
to be
Correct.
able to bring people together who can do that, who have a desire to do that but cannot achieve that individually. These are the sort of things where institutions are important,
Right.
funding mechanisms are important. So I think we should incentivize some of this. We are often, and I think it's related, often the research, the kind of the research philosophy is a little too highly individualistic,
Yes.
because in the end people feel that's all. I mean, I have the autonomy to
Right.
only do that, uh, whereas if there is an incentive structure for bringing people together to collaborate across areas and so on, I think you can do much more. uh,
Great. I actually also wanted to understand, how do you perceive the environment for fundamental research in India, and I mean, compared with other countries, and are there any specific advantages unique to India?
Yes, I think so. I mean, that's in a sense why many of us are back in India, and despite maybe having spent many years elsewhere. And I think there is that foundation which we talked about earlier,
Yes.
which gives a certain environment in the fundamental sciences. I mean, um, it is very empowering to know that someone like Satyen Bose or C.V. Raman or others, in very difficult circumstances, had still made pioneering work. So you feel if they could do it, why can't we? And so there is that feeling that come, and I think a lot of people share that in India. So there is a sense of pride in being able to overcome some of these obstacles and yet do path breaking work. The other thing is that I think you spoke about advantages being in India. Yes, I think firstly, India has a vast talent pool of students and others which one can harness potentially. I'm not saying we are doing the best job of harnessing it yet, but we can do it, and we it's a very valuable resource. and often very passionate students who are very passionate about doing science, young people. Uh, so very often we have some public lectures by some well-known scientists and so on, and after the lecture they are mobbed by all these undergraduates, the high school students who are just very hungry for knowledge and hungry to learn about the things.
Correct.
And many of them tell me, when I give a public lecture in the US, I don't get this kind of a
Okay.
response, almost like being a pop star. I mean, you are like a rock star when you give these lectures in India. So, I mean, we take it a bit for granted, but I think but that's a very positive feeling that can
Correct.
be uh, harnessed. The other thing is that being in India, in some ways, also enables you to chart your own directions. I think collectively as a community, I think science is if you think of science as a sort of an ecosystem or an environment, you need diversity.
Right.
Diversity of thinking is what ultimately generates new ideas.
Correct.
And I think it's possible in India to develop that diversity, which will be different from the Japanese way of thinking or the European way of approaching science, or the North American way of approaching science or certain scientific questions. You can develop your own sort of a culture, a scientific culture,
Yes.
and which will have its richness. It happened in the Soviet Union, for instance. They were cut off a bit, but they developed very strong mathematics and theoretical physics, even some experimental physics as well, which they develop their own
Correct.
culture of
Correct.
science, and I think there's an opportunity to do that here. And uh, and lastly, I would say that there are problems which are uniquely Indian, and this is more to do with maybe not, I mean, it depends on what you call fundamental science, but there are problems which are unique to India. And for instance, in climate science, the Indian monsoon is a system which affects the Indian subcontinent so
Correct.
much, and we need people who can, and it's a complex dynamical system which we don't understand. So it's a problem which is a opportunity for Indian scientists to work on that, to get the data for that, I mean, and come up with maybe a new understanding for that. So we would have the edge there if we were to tackle that problem and kind of throw at it the resources it needs and so on.
Correct.
So I think we have an edge in all these directions, but we have to capitalize on.
Correct. Correct. And most importantly, we need to also understand the opportunities that are unique to India.
Yeah,
And as you mentioned, we need to capitalize, on such kind of opportunities. And there should be some level of awareness also, because not everyone, because the in India the culture is such, we are very driven by Western cultures and Western thinking.
right.
So we forget sometimes to look
Yeah,
within India and look at the unique opportunities that exist for us.
sure.
Yeah. So, sir, actually, I also wanted to understand what are the initiatives do you think are crucial to bridge the gap between industry and academia? There are certain initiatives that are already launched by the government, which are aligned with lab to land kind of an approach. And Are there any successful models or examples that you can share within India or outside India, which we can, which can bridge this gap?
Yeah, it's not something I have first-hand kind of experience with, though it is something that interests me a lot, and I'm trying to understand it better. So my thoughts might be superficial, or it might be kind of incomplete, because I don't have a full knowledge of that ecosystem and the interaction. Definitely, for instance, in the IITs and so on, there is a more of that happening.
Right.
But maybe in the little more, that's often between engineering and industry.
Right.
But if you ask in sciences, one model that I'm a little familiar with, which I find very inspiring, is something that's happening in Bangalore in the life sciences, in biology.
Okay.
uh, so I don't know if you know of the Bangalore life science cluster. It is a
Yes.
cluster of
Yes.
institutions.
Yes.
There is NCBS, the
Right.
National Center for Biological Sciences, which is our sister institute within the
Oh, okay.
TIFR. It's our
Okay.
sister center.
Okay.
So, in fact, we have many joint things. They're complementary to us. We are more in the physical mathematical sciences, they are in the biological
Correct.
sciences, but then we are actually collaborating on some things. So, they are very much into fundamental biology,
Okay.
questions of biology. Then there is InSTEM, which is also a research institute, a biology research institute focused on stem cell research. It
Okay.
is funded by the Department of Biotechnology.
Yes.
And then there are these two entities, which, but it's a little more translational. It works with clinical
Okay.
aspects of stem cell research, is in a way has
Right.
fundamental biology, but it connects to things which will have medical implications and so on. And then there are these two other entities, one called CCAMP, which is an incubator center
Okay.
for biotech, bio inspired
Okay.
companies. And
Okay.
it has been very successful. You can look them up. So it's part of this. So they're all in this campus, which, so all these four entities. The fourth one is the Tata Institute for Genomics and Society, which studies, which is trying to develop a kind of a study of the genomics in Indian society, and more towards the bioinformatics and the applied side. And CCAMP in particular has incubated several successful industries in the biology, biotech kind of startup system, ecosystem. Um, so this cluster has a whole connection from the fundamental biological discoveries to the industry. It has this whole
Right.
set of institutions, each of
Right.
which forms a link with the other one, and therefore things have happened, and people and several startups come there and want to be incubated there because they have access to a very solid academia.
Correct.
At the same time, many of these ideas they can try to then translate entrepreneurially. So for me, it's a bit of a nice model of how uh, this channel between fundamental the sciences and industry, the knowledge
Right.
flow can happen
Right. Right.
and lead to some tangible results. I think several very successful
Yes.
companies have come out of it. So, in fact, some I often dream of having something similar in the mathematical and physical sciences.
Right.
And I would like to see ICTS playing a similar role in sort of nucleating a set of other entities
Right.
which will be able to translate things into industry. And in the mathematical and physical sciences, there's a whole, of course,
Correct.
set of uh, um, questions and applications that come up through big data, or
Correct.
I mean, even or through in physics, through some of the new materials that are being studied, or quantum computing, or whatever.
Correct.
So,
Um.
so I think
Yeah.
there is this
Yes.
example which I feel is fairly
Right,
successful.
right. I think theoretical sciences can also play a crucial role in building useful software tools for the researchers. Probably. Uh,
A lot of I mean as we discussed earlier, a lot of theoretical sciences is now highly computational,
Correct.
and a lot of it is data driven. And
Right.
so they are many of my colleagues develop very sophisticated ways of analyzing data,
Right.
of extracting things from them, from data, and they come up with their own code often
Correct.
for doing
Correct.
that. And some of this, I think, can have applications in many other domains.
Right.
uh,
Right.
and um, and astronomy, for instance, is like the CERN collider you mentioned earlier. Astronomy and the big telescopes that are there are now some of the biggest sources of data in
Correct. Correct.
and the that data and the way in which you extract information from it the has made, at least in the US, people who are trained in that, in astronomy and big data astronomy, I mean, companies just like
Right.
go after them because they can then develop all kinds of, I mean, they are so
Yes.
versatile, so good at developing the appropriate software
Right.
that it's a big plus. But in India, I think there's awareness is not there, that you have all these trained PhD students who are coming out. Not
Right.
all of them need to go into
Right.
academia,
Yeah.
but they are a big risk. They have been trained so well in many institutions in India that they can offer a lot
Correct.
to
Correct.
the software industry or anyone who is
Even in
using.
finance sector, they can contribute
Yeah,
significantly.
a lot of people, I mean, even theoretical physicists, and in India, I mean, some, yeah, in India, it's happening a little bit, but I think the the industry has not yet taken that leap.
Okay.
Whereas in the US, theoretical physicists or mathematicians who want to go into finance, they are like snapped up like that
Right.
because they know that these are well trained people who
Correct.
can do a lot.
Correct. So there are lots of awareness that needs to,
Be
happen
creative.
in
Yeah,
order to industry be aware of these are the resources that
right.
they can take advantage of.
In
Interesting.
fact, we are trying to start a kind of an internship program, which I think
Okay.
will be helpful in
Hmm.
this because
Okay.
if PhD students can go and spend a few months in some industry,
Correct.
uh, and then the industry gets to see the kind of
Right.
skills that they bring. And
Right.
even in 3 months, maybe you can't do very much, but
Right.
you get an awareness, and vice
Yes.
versa. The students also see the opportunities that are there
Correct.
in industry,
Correct.
which they can
Correct.
so I think this is something where industry and fundamental science institutions could engage, have many more such internship kind of
Right. But
opportunities.
how much is the acceptance, from the industry side? Because industry, they have their own objectives, goals, and priorities. So, is there a significant acceptance rate to onboard a PhD student, and offer them internship opportunities?
Yeah, at the moment it is not there. I think we have to create it. I think
Okay.
we have to create it. And I've been talking to people, and I think uh, it will happen. And we have to. I think both sides have to push a
Right.
bit
Right. Right.
to make it happen. Some people, you have to take a leap that uh,
Correct.
that this is going to be useful. I mean, and I mean, what is 3 months paying an intern? If you,
Right.
the payoff might be very high if
Correct.
it's successful.
Correct.
So people should be willing to experiment a bit. Industry
Right.
should be willing to
Right.
experiment, and then I think it will. It will. People. That's how the awareness will grow.
Right. I think we covered the skill development part as well. But let's focus on it a little more detail. Can you elaborate on skills that are currently lacking among the researchers and that are essential for the industry collaboration? And how can academic programs be tailored to address this particular? I think ICTS is already doing this to some extent. So I would like to, know a little bit more in detail on this.
So, of course, I think currently the skills that are developed in researchers in our institutions is mainly for an academic career,
Yes.
and I think that can and should change because I think only a small fraction necessarily of PhDs needs to go into academia,
Correct.
uh, um, uh, and uh, uh, and so developing these other skills, some of which, of course, accidentally happen, so to say, by like all the computer skills or the
Right.
ability to do sophisticated coding. I think in many of the fundamental sciences that happens, or similarly, just the ability to logically sort of break down a problem into
Yes.
smaller doable problems. All those come with the training I think that you have in
Right.
fundamental sciences. So
Right.
those are built in a
Hmm.
sense.
Hmm.
But in addition, I guess the question is, it's a matter of your your attitude. I mean, in the fundamental sciences, uh, you are not necessarily driven by trying to get something tangible out there. So it's a lot more open ended, the research, and that's how it should be. I think research, if to get new discoveries, things need to be open ended. But sometimes having definite goals and so on also helps. And maybe also working in teams
Right.
to achieve this goal is a skill that could be probably developed a lot more, because I think often in industry people work in a team towards a goal, whereas PhD students most often they work with their advisor, but that's a kind of a different role.
Right.
But having maybe encouraging students to collaborate with each other or form some large groups. At least in the theoretical sciences, it doesn't happen. In experimental sciences, often people need to work
Yeah.
in a group, or if you're working on a big experimental facility. So maybe that's some skills that can be inculcated. And yeah, I think what uh, there's one big kind of a mental barrier often, which is scientists are often not satisfied until they've fully understood something, or they've fully perfected it, whereas often that's in tension with getting something done. uh, so I don't know how to get over that. Some people have the ability to kind of switch from that mode to another mode. I think just flexibility in thinking about things is probably useful. Yeah.
When we get used to that kind of thinking over the years, it becomes difficult to change that kind of thinking and accept, think like thought process from industry, or for industry, thought process of academia. Uh,
Right.
that's
But in some of these new areas, I mean, again, in these data sciences or in artificial intelligence and so on, I think a research mode of functioning is necessary in some industries,
correct.
because
Correct.
that is where I mean, at least initially, because you are trying to come up with new ideas, you're
Correct.
trying to do this thing. So sometimes that skill can be useful for out of the box thinking,
Correct.
and or yeah, just developing things in a way which is much more robust. And so yeah, I think you need all sorts
But
of
do you think, when we talk about research, the outcome is not, certain in most of the cases. We know that okay, these are the possible approaches that we need to, execute, and this is, an outcome that we are expecting. But oftenly, especially in experimental physics, you expect something and something else happens in results. So how, I mean, so there is a success rate that is involved while doing research. So can you give some clarity on how do scientists tackle such kind of challenges to increase their success rate? Is there any methodology, or is it something that is still a black box for most of the scientific community?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the time scientists are trying some problems and they fail. They are kind of stuck, or they find that they have taken a wrong approach or something. So I think you get used to failure. I
Correct.
mean, you have to kind of have develop the mental strength to overcome failures and
Right.
try again, try a
Right.
different route,
Right.
try something else. And maybe out of five different things, one of them will work. And uh, so uh, with experience, you develop some
Yes.
skill or some judgment about
Yes.
things that look promising, are more promising than others because you've tried sometimes some things and you've seen how things have worked. You develop a kind of a hunch for things. So it's I think, but on the whole, I mean, that's of course one of the reasons we do science also, because
Right.
the creative leap or the insight the that you have and new insight that you develop or get is just is like a miracle. It is like it just
Right. Right.
happens, and then it's very exhilarating. So that's in a way part of the kick that you get
Right.
from the discovery. So you that makes the whole all those failures and wrong attempts worth it. You at
But
the end of it, yes.
don't you think that's kind of a red flag for the industry, ecosystem?
Well, industry also, I think there are so many startups that fail. I mean, people
Yes.
are also
Of course.
trying things,
Of course.
and then maybe you have a great idea, you think this is going to revolutionize the world, but then
Yes.
somehow, because of whatever reason, it just
Right.
doesn't get the traction that it deserves, perhaps, or maybe
Right.
it's before its time, or it's after its time, or so many other factors come in. So, in a way, I think it's similar, and so that's why I know many scientists who have become, I mean, many people who have become very successful also. This because scientists are good at dealing with uncertainty
Correct.
and kind of over time they develop a sense also, a good hunch, and at least in the realm of ideas of what can work and what can't work. Yeah, so I think if you need someone to do a execute a predetermined task, I think you'll find many others who can do that. You don't need a PhD to do that
Correct. Correct.
necessarily. I think where a PhD comes in for industry is the ability to come up with some new ideas once in a while. I mean,
Right.
uh, but the payoff from those new ideas can be
Correct.
enormous,
Correct.
so you need that as part of your mix, so to say.
Correct. Correct.
You need
Correct.
people like that who will take your industry in a new direction or
Right.
give it a new dimension.
Right. Sir, I wanted to understand, in your opinion, which of the government policies have had the most significant impact on the scientific research in India? And are there any areas where policy changes could further enhance research productivity and innovation?
I mean, if you're talking about recent times, definitely, I think the fact that CSR, the corporate social
Yes.
responsibility, under that mandate, private corporations can also give research institutions their CSR funding, and that can be counted as part of the CSR funding. That was,
Right.
I think, a very good
Yes.
initiative, which I think probably the awareness has still not grown in the industry that that's a good way to use your
Right.
CSR.
Right.
But I think in principle that's a very good policy. The other one, which I think we'll have to see how it works out, is this ANRF, I mean, the Anusandhan National
Right.
Research Foundation, which was initially shaped to be something like the National Science Foundation in the US, and would be a good way to kind of fund research in not only scientific institutions but also in universities, not only in the research institutions but also universities and other places, incentivize them, maybe bring students and research institutions closer. All these ideas, it remains to be seen how it will
Correct.
develop, but
Correct.
at least the initial blueprint had a lot of promise. And but like many other things, going from the blueprint to the
Correct.
translating it, we'll have to see how that happens. um, as of as to things that can be done, I think the scientific institutions need to have a lot more autonomy in determining the way in which the directions they pursue, the way they administer themselves, it should not be centralized. I think uh, the government needs to trust the scientific community to be able to do the best that it
Correct.
can, because often what happens is there is always like with funding and everything, there are just so many bureaucratic hurdles, and that it's almost as if people are worried that like there's going to be misuse of 10 rupees here, 5 rupees there, and so on. It's just to I sometimes say that to prevent one pencil being stolen from this thing, you put in place something that will be the price of much more than the price of all
Correct.
the pencils that would have been stolen. And it is not only the amounts; it's also then the whole process becomes a very kind of has a lot of I mean, what should I say? It becomes a big drag mentally and procedurally and so on. And I mean, often funds are sanctioned, but then uh, instead of holding you to account for the results of that funding, which is ultimately what
Correct.
counts, you're given the money so that you want to see what has come out. But instead, people are always trying to micromanage the utilization of those funds in the interim, like always asking, oh, what are you spending this one on, that one on, why do you need to spend that? No, I think the scientists should be empowered to spend once you have vetted their proposals and felt that that's this thing, they should be empowered, and the institutions and the institutional heads should be empowered to this thing. But if they don't produce, then of course by all means hold them accountable, that you're spending public money and you've not delivered on what you said you would deliver.
Right.
uh, uh, that's fair, that's perfectly legitimate, but you shouldn't be always looking over the shoulder and asking, oh, what are you doing here? No, no, you need to get permission for this.
Correct.
uh, and I think we also need to internationalize our science. There is often within the funding structures a kind of a distrust of internationalization, so to say. I mean, we make it very difficult to for scientists to travel to other places. There's often a distinction made in every funding this thing for domestic travel as opposed to
Correct.
foreign travel,
Yes.
as if foreign travel is something kind of like a junket or something, whereas scientists need to travel to present their results, to collaborate with people, to, in fact, advertise the strength of Indian science or the science that is done in the country. Otherwise, you will not be noticed necessarily. So these sort of things that, I mean, there should be a recognition that science is international. Scientists need these sort of things to do well at the international level, and we should set international benchmarks for ourselves in our science, so that hold people accountable, not to some national system of judgments, but internationally. There should be a peer reviews which are international. There should be a kind of a broader sense that how is the Indian community doing as measured globally.
In fact, we recently, I think this month, August, we are publishing another like this month's edition of a newsletter, and I think in that one of our research analysts has published this particular data of India's contributions in international research and domestic research, and there is some analysis that she has done. Sir, can you give some advice? Or what advice would you like to give to our young researchers who are just starting their careers in India, and if you can share emerging fields of research, uh, promising fields for these aspiring researchers, and opportunities for them that they can take advantage of.
I mean, may be not very qualified to talk about science in general, but at least in physical sciences, mathematical sciences, I think I can say that definitely. I think it's great that you've decided to pursue a PhD. It's something that I mean, it's good to have a passion for the subject, and that passion and that motivation is very important, more than any of your grades or anything else. It's about stamina in research. It's about kind of you need a certain optimism, you need a certain drive, you also need to develop good judgment. So all these things are skills which usually you may not have been assessed on those skills in your coursework. So but now that you will find in your PhD, these are very important, and develop those skills. In India, you have many opportunities. There are now excellent PhD programs where you will get an education training which is rivals that in some of the best places in the West or in Japan or other
I think we
scientific.
have opportunities to pursue direct PhD as well after BTech.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Ma'am, in ICTS and other institutions, we take people after BTech for PhD, even after BSc for what is called an integrated PhD. You can get a master's and PhD together. So these opportunities are there. And as for areas, India, for instance, is heavily invested in a lot of international uh, big science collaborations like LIGO India, in astronomy in general. LIGO India, the Square Kilometer Array of telescopes, and astronomy is an area where all these new instruments are going to teach us enormously new things about the universe. And gravitational waves have opened a whole new window into the universe.
Yes.
This is an area which I think is going to be rich in data, and it needs so lot of people trained in experimental astronomy, experimental techniques. In fact, many people from engineering backgrounds can also contribute heavily there, but also needs theorists who will be able to make sense of the data and try to falsify theories or come up with new ideas. There are many mysteries in cosmology and astrophysics, I think, that unsolved problems, challenges for bright young people about the early universe, etc., which we will get data on, which we will be able to address experimentally. So that's an exciting new area. The study of new materials and new kinds of phases of matter and so
Yes.
on is another area which has a lot of promise. And again, people are able to now design new materials and come up with their properties at the quantum level. I mean, we are really beginning to see quantum mechanics being applied to really tailor make systems, and which show very unusual phenomena, and which could have applications in maybe developing quantum computers or other things. So these are other areas I think which are very interesting. Of course, in the area of the more mathematical sciences, there are all the traditional areas of mathematics which are, I think, which India, I think, needs many more people to work in mathematics. I think few people still go into mathematics research, which I think is very important for India to have a large body of well-trained mathematicians, whether in applied kind of mathematics or pure mathematics of various kinds. And I think that a strong mathematics base is very important. So I would stress that for people. And so all these developments in AI and machine learning and so on, a lot of it is rooted in mathematics. I
Yeah.
mean, and it's the understanding of these things are still missing at a fundamental level. Why is it that some of these large language models work so well, etc. And so that kind of understanding, we need people who can who have the concepts to even ask these questions and answer them. And that's going to be the people who can do that are the ones who will be innovating in the
Correct.
future, not the people who are just copying
Correct.
existing things. So
Yes.
that's where the fundamental science ultimately comes in, because the people who will innovate will be using their understanding of the deep
Correct.
principles, whereas people who copy will be just copying existing things.
Correct. Correct. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. It was very, very insightful and inspiring session. I hope it was equally inspiring for our viewers as well.
Thanks very much.
So we hope you enjoyed this episode. Do let us know your thoughts in the comments and feel free to subscribe PM's newsletter to stay up to date with latest episodes, inspiring stories and mind-boggling opportunities. See you in the next episode of the Researcher's Lens.